Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Katie Rowley, and I am with the NOAA Central Library as the Outreach Librarian. I'm here with my colleagues, Sarah Davis, who is our Senior Bibliometrics Librarian, and Jennifer Fagan-Fry, who is the NOAA Institutional Repository Manager. This is a new platform from the library, so bear with us as we go through maybe some technical challenges. But first up, you are muted. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A panel when that opens at the end, or you can chat them in the chat panel. Also, if we are recording this, so if you want to share this or watch it later, we will have this available for you on the library's YouTube channel. So what are we talking about today? So today we are talking about ORCID and the NOAA Central Library Consortium benefits and how benefits and backgrounds, excuse me. So this is going to be learning how to set up an ORCID, what this consortium means to you, the benefits, and about our support for open science. So it's going to cover kind of like what is ORCID, why you need it, what you can use it for. All of those things, all those good things are going to be covered in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our two speakers, and they are going to give you a wonderful presentation on ORCID.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you, Katie, for the introduction. I will say, as Sarah and I are speaking and going over all this, please feel free to add in questions or anything in the chat. We will try to get to them as we can. We do plan to leave plenty of time at the end for discussion and to answer questions. So, Sarah, if you want to move the slide to the next one, we'll just dive right in. We won't do any pretenses here. So, first and foremost, what is ORCID? ORCID is what's called a digital persistent identifier, or DPI, and you're going to hear us use this term a lot throughout this presentation. I thought it would be best to sort of start off talking about what is a digital persistent identifier in general. Typically, when we're talking about DPI, we're referring to a reference to some sort of resource, typically a digital resource. So the thing most people think of is a DOI, a digital object identifier, specifically for a publication. But not necessarily, it doesn't have to be just for publications. So DPIs are globally unique, they're persistent, they're machine resolvable. They are most often used for disambiguation and identification across multiple platforms. Um, ORCID specifically sort of functions like a DOI, but it's for researchers, it's for people, as opposed to a publication or a data set or software, something like that. An ORCID is a 16-digit number. It's randomly assigned by the system and generated upon registration, and it should be expressed as a full URL. So, much like a DOI, when you are assigned an ORCID, it will come up with the specific number, and you can see what I have here as an example. However, when you're expressing or letting folks know that you have an ORCID, the preferred method to do that is through a full URL, which you can see in the second portion of this. The reason is because ORCID links directly to your profile, which we'll get into all that in just a minute. So once you see what the profile looks like, it'll make sense why they prefer you to use the ORCID URL as opposed to just a number. So I also thought it'd be important to address this. Why ORCID? Why are we talking just about ORCID? I have a little bit more about some of the other options a little bit later on, and we can talk about those too if folks have questions about those. But ORCID specifically is a nonprofit organization and was created by the larger researcher community. And its main purpose is to support open science. It's one of the few DPIs for people, like personal identifiers, that is widely used in the publishing industry and all research communities. And there's a wide variety of interoperability. So that's sort of why we're focusing on ORCID, but doesn't necessarily have to be ORCID. So a lot of the things that we're going to discuss and cover apply to other digital persistent identifiers for people as well. Next slide, Sarah. So, what are the benefits of having an ORCID? I have sort of a short, I shouldn't say short list, it's a pretty long list here. First and foremost, disambiguation. You can distinguish yourself from others who have a similar name, the same name. My maiden name is Jennifer Fagan. There are 6 other Jennifer Fagans who have the same middle name, and we are all the same age. It's a surprisingly common name. So having an ORCID is a way for me to disambiguate myself from those folks. ORCID provides you name control and flexibility, so you are able to manage and control how your name is utilized, the variations of your name, and if those change throughout your career. So again, my maiden name is just Jennifer Fagan. I was married and hyphenated, so now it's Jennifer Fagan-Fry. I can manage all that information within my ORCID. ORCIDs promote visibility and discovery because it links all of your research outputs together, and you have control of who can see and access that information. But it's all in one profile. Because it's all in one place, you can save time, and also you can allow trusted organizations to add to your ORCID profile. So, adding new publications or updating your affiliation information, which means it's going to save you time to do more research, to work on your things. And we'll get more into that trusted organizations part in a bit. If anyone has a question about that, we'll get into it in just a minute. Having an ORCID helps reduce administrative tasks. You can use your ORCID to log in to a growing number of systems across the publishing universe and across other open science institutions and funders, and information will be auto-populated. What you do is you authenticate, and it'll pull in information. And then interoperability. So I've sort of touched on this quite a bit already, but there's a lot of different systems that use ORCID, and they can easily share data in your profile back and forth. So you can share that with funders or publishers, other data repositories, etc. The examples I have here, 2 big ones, are ORCID is integrated with Crossref and DataSite. So next slide, please, Sarah. So just a little bit more detail on this sort of idea of interoperability. ORCID sort of has this principle, and they use it all over all their documentation, of enter once, reuse often. So here, what you're looking at is a researcher profile, and what this diagram sort of shows is how it can connect with publishers, with employers, with funders. So, what I'd like to do is sort of just walk through this diagram, sort of through the lens of working with a publisher. And we're just going to say Wiley, because I know that Wiley has integrated ORCID into their publishing workflows. So, first in the center, there's you. That's your ORCID profile. You've updated that. You have your affiliations, your publications, all your stuff is in there. And we're going to submit a paper to Wiley. What you do with Wiley is you would authenticate with them, and they would collect your valid authenticated ORCID ID in that URL format. With that collected ID, what they would do is store that in their metadata, and then it becomes part of the display that is on the article's web page, right? So every article has its own landing page, and your ORCID ID information would be linked directly to your name on that page. And when you click on the little ORCID link next to it, it links you out to your ORCID profile. So this authenticated ID is also used to verify and link up your affiliation information, which that's how it connects to your employment, your employer, the grant folks that you're working with. It pulls that information and stores that information as well. And then they use that to make sure they're matching up folks correctly. So they use the information in your ORCID plus the information you gave them to make sure, yes, this is the correct person. And then once those linkages are established, the publisher system and ORCID can now synchronize that information. So an example of synchronization would be a publisher updating your profile for you, which we'll get into how that would happen or why and when they could do that in a minute. Update your ORCID profile with that new publication. Or if you did peer review for them, they could update your ORCID profile saying so-and-so did peer review for us on this specific journal. So that's sort of how it fits together. And that's sort of the general process for any type of organization you're working with, whether it's a publisher, a funder, um, other granting agencies, anything like that. So next slide, please, Sarah. So what information is in your ORCID profile? First and foremost, there's your name, obviously, and then there's your affiliation. So within affiliation, you can have your current affiliation, your previous affiliations, and employers would all be listed there. Um, Education, so wherever you went to school, wherever you got your degrees. Work products. ORCID provides a wide variety of work products that folks can list within their profile. So there's options for publications, datasets, software, code, um, gray literature, policy documents. The list goes on and on and on. It's a wide range of publications and research outputs that you can link to. I think videos are available in there. There's a real big range. You can also include grant or funding information, and then also peer reviewed activities. So I briefly touched on this on the previous slide. These are things that only trusted organizations can add, peer reviewed activities. We can get into trusted organizations in just a minute, but the publisher would be the one to add that to your profile for you. So something to keep in mind. And I just want to say, that's a lot of information, right? And in theory, this is a public profile. So anyone could see this information, except you, through ORCID, have control over all of this information, what's in there, what isn't in there, what's visible, and what is not visible. So next slide, please, Sarah. Specifically, you can determine who can see what in your profile. So under each one of those sections, like affiliation or education or work product, you can determine how much of that information is available for the public, for trusted parties or organizations, or things that you want to keep private just for you and for ORCID. So a public setting is pretty obvious, right? Any of that information that's listed as public can be viewed or accessed by anyone who can visit orcid.gov or orcid.org, excuse me. Trusted parties and organizations is a slightly more restrictive lens. So that information is restricted to those organizations that you have labeled as trusted parties. Trusted parties can be individuals, but they can also be organizations. You, as the researcher and the owner of that profile, have that control over who you deem as a trusted party and a trusted organization. You can give that access to folks. I'm going to go into this a little bit more a little bit later on, so bear with me. I know I keep referring to it, but we'll talk about it in depth in just a minute. Next slide, please, Sarah. So specifically, let's talk about ORCID at NOAA. We kind of covered like the basics of what ORCID is, but let's talk about how we plan to use it and what it means for folks here at NOAA. First and foremost, it is highly recommended. ORCID identifiers, ORCIDs are not required by any means. It is highly recommended though. Um, you could use a different identifier. There's a number of other options. I mentioned these earlier. Researcher ID, um, there's Ringgold IDs. There's a variety of other personal identifiers that you could use. However, I shouldn't say however, any of those are fine. ORCID does provide a few additional benefits. We kind of covered a lot of those. And also, I'll get to this in a second, we are members of ORCID. But any of these identifiers, having them is key to sort of supporting open science. And this is done through linking. So by linking your publications and your data sets and your software, your code, whatever it may be, whatever that research output is, linking all of that together supports open science. It also provides transparency for open science through listing of affiliations and funding for things. Identifiers like ORCID can help you with measuring impact. It makes it a lot easier to track your publications and your data sets and how those are being cited. And more publishers are starting to implement ORCID, specifically ORCID, into their workflows. So on this slide, I've linked here a statement from a number of publishers. I think it's up to almost 50 different publishers that have integrated ORCIDs into their workflows and are or will be displaying ORCID profile icons that link out to individual researchers' ORCID profiles from the publication landing page. So the library, to sort of help support this, the central library, has actually entered into an agreement with ORCID through the US Federal ORCID Consortium. So we have done this on behalf of NOAA. The library is covering all of this cost. It wound up being like a 60% savings for us to enter into this consortial agreement as opposed to doing it on our own, to provide the agency with a number of consortia specific benefits. So these benefits are exclusive to consortium members, and it actually is going to give us a wide range of capabilities and access in order to link all of our publications and all of our information together to again support open science, but also hopefully ease some of our internal workflows, specifically in regards to some of the processes that we're already doing. So next slide, please. So how do we plan to use this membership? And I'm going to start referring to integrations. This is essentially how we are going to use ORCID system within our own systems. First and foremost, we are looking at and plan to implement an ORCID integration into RPTS and the NOAA and NOAA IR submissions. What that means is that when you submit to the institutional repository, you would be doing that process that we talked about a little bit ago, where you authenticate through ORCID. It gives us all your information. You give us your publication information, and then we link all that together for you. All of that information is going to be linked together, and then this is sort of the second part, right? This display section. On the IR, what you're going to see next to your name on that article is a little green circle with that ID next to your name, and that's the direct link to your ORCID profile. This is something that we are working to implement in the institutional repository, but also we're hoping in the future to get it set up on datasets. So anything that you have possibly archived through NCEI or something like that. You can see this now on a number of publishers, but more and more, like I said, are starting to incorporate ORCID into their workflows. So they will also have those little dots, essentially those display dots that link out from a researcher's, one of a researcher's articles to their full profile with all of their articles. Next slide, Sarah. And then finally, long term, this is a long term thing, but long term, what we would like to do is once we have this integration where we're getting this information upon submission, so it would be like giving us your ORCID ID would be linked in your RPTS submissions, or if you submit via the NOAA IR form or through email, something like that. Using that information, what we would like to do is have read and write access, where NOAA, specifically the Central Library, would be listed as one of your trusted organizations. So what does that mean? You would have to grant us permission to do that. We can't just do things on your behalf without you saying, yes, I trust this person to do that. So we would have to request permission and you would have to grant that. At any point in time, you can also revoke that permission. You don't always have to, once you grant it, it isn't permanent. You have the power to revoke that at any time or reinstate it at any time. But once we had that access and those permissions, what that means is it would provide the ability for the library to go to your ORCID profile and grab information from it, i.e., we could get your publications and make sure we have those in the repository and we have all the correct metadata in the repository. But we could also update your profile with new publications. Say you publish a new tech memo with us. We could push that information to your ORCID profile so you don't have to go in and update it. we can update your profile for you. This also would be the case for affiliations. We could update your affiliation. Say I move from the central library to the Office of Exploration. We could, in the library, update my affiliation information for me. So a lot of that would reduce a lot of the burden of researchers and folks in the office and administrative folks from having to keep and monitor and update all these publications. We could take on some of that burden while also ensuring we are seeing and getting and accessing all of the publications that we should for the repository in order to comply with the NOAA PAR plan. So now that I kind of went through the basics of it, sort of where we're going, what ORCID is, I'm going to actually toss it over to Sarah now, and she can go into registering, setting up, and sort of the nitty gritty of getting your ORCID established, or if you already have one established, how to update it and maintain it. Sarah?
All right, thanks, Jen. So I'm going to just walk us through the process of setting up, updating, and maintaining your ORCID profile. First, how to register if you don't already have one, then how to properly enter your NOAA affiliation in either a new or existing profile. So if you already do have one, which is great, gold star. Then various ways to add works to your profile. And finally, a little bit about syncing your account with other DPIs and keeping your profile up to date. All right, so first thing first, registering on orcid.org. We have links to this. You can Google it. Very easy to find. You just click on the sign in and register button, which will take you to a pretty standard sign in or register window that pops up, and you click on register now. There are 3 initial steps here. The first is entering your name. Technically, you only have to enter a first name to get an ORCID ID. We would prefer that you use a last name because it helps us disambiguate our authors. You also enter your email address. You can enter your primary email address, which is required, and multiple additional email addresses if you would like to. So other organizations you've worked for, your personal email address, perhaps a university affiliation, if you have that as well. We need you to use the noaa.gov email address as one of your emails because the domain is one of the ways that we can find our authors. So to make this work for locating you and finding you, to link to your publications and other works, we do need to have that noaa.gov email address. So you're then going to get a list of various individuals who already have ORCIDs. Look through the list, affirm that you're not already registered. If you see that you did register and forgot, know that you are not alone. And then go back in and try to retrieve your ID. There's help for that on the homepage. So once you've affirmed that you're not already registered, you create a password, very standard. And finally, selecting your visibility settings like Jen talked about before, and consenting to the terms of use, and just finalizing your registration. Just takes a couple minutes. Finally, you will get a verification email to your email address. So ideally, do that as soon as possible. Don't put it off. It will expire. You can ask them to send it again. But importantly, you can't start adding things and editing your profile until you've verified your email address. All right. So once you've verified your email address, you get a nice little page with your ORCID ID, your contact information, and you can start filling out all your details: employment, education, funding, memberships, accolades and awards you've won, and a list of your works. So importantly, when selecting your employment affiliation, you will find that there are a lot of different options for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. There are multiple listings for labs, for departments, for science centers, and there are just multiple listings for NOAA. The correct one to select here is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Washington, D.C., District of Columbus, U.S. option. There is an option to change the location later. So you can do that. That doesn't have to be the location you're at right now. This is just the one that has the correct ROR and fund ref associations with it. So once you've selected that, you can edit the details in this little box that pops up. So edit your city and state if needed. This is from my profile. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, so I updated that. Oh, this is not. This is for my fake profile, but it's still Silver Spring, Maryland. You can add your details such as the job department, job title, and start date. For contractors and affiliates, you would want to indicate in your department or role that you are a contractor and the name of your contracting company. And then there are a number of other details you can add here. They are totally optional. All right, so what you're going to see when you have the correct affiliation chosen is that you get this ROR ID that's 02Z5NHE81. Just to double check, this is what it looks like in the details page. All right, so you've now established your profile. You can add as much information or as little. You can also add multiple organization affiliations. So you can have both the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as your employer, and also your line office or department. All right. So when it comes to adding works, there are 5 different ways to add things to your profile. They make it really, really easy. And they support adding a lot of different types of work, which is one of the reasons we like ORCID. They support not just journal articles, but data sets, reports, books and book chapters, patents, software, magazine articles, newspaper articles, conference papers. Any work that you've created that you want to put an ORCID ID on, you can probably enter in your ORCID profile. So the first way to add items is through searching and linking outside databases. There are a number of different options, including DataCite, which is what I'm going to show an example of. And it'll just pop up a thing, and then you have to authorize it to access. So here you just get a token, and you can go back in at any time and turn this token off if you no longer want DataCite to share information with your ORCID profile. Other link wizards have slightly different processes, but they're all pretty similar, and they do all ask for permission to share things. So this automates a lot of things, but it might not be what you want. All right, you can also enter your DOI. Really, really easy. Great if you have a NOAA pub, because NOAA pubs have DOIs. You just enter the DOI or the URL and search. When it comes up, you can add more details. So this came up with the report title, but not the correct work type. So you want to edit the work type. You want to add any sort of subtitles, the institution. If you want to add a more exact publication date, this was 2022, but I happen to know that this publication came out in May, so we could put that on there as well. Direct links, I added a link to our repository, and also a number of other details if you choose to. So you can do the really easy route of just updating the work type and making sure the title's right, or you can add more information if you would like that to appear in your profile. Very similar process is finding works in PubMed. You'd enter the PubMed number, search, and it brings up your article. Again, you need to edit work type, make sure that that's correct. This contained all the information that I wanted it to have, but you could add more if you wanted, such as if you had an open access version on a different site and you wanted to link to that there. The subtitle was important, that sort of thing. All right. Adding from BibTeX. .bib files can be downloaded from Web of Science, EndNote, Google Scholar, a few other places. Any reference management software is going to give you a BibTeX file if you ask for it. And so you can just upload that file from your computer and import it. Then select the works. You can select all or individual ones if you're sort of filling in gaps. Click OK, and they've been added. Super easy process. Finally, you can add things manually. This is something you're more likely to use for a data set that doesn't have a DOI, conference proceedings and posters, items that don't have their own DPI or aren't in another database. So particularly if you're doing some retroactive adding from, pre-DOI days, this is a good way to do like a few things. If not, if you're adding a lot of things that don't have DOIs, it'd probably be best to use the .bib, BibTeX import, probably via Web of Science or EndNote, and we could help you with that if you need it. All right, so totally optional, but linking with other DPIs. So Publon's Research ID, Scopus, Google Scholars. It can really help build your online presence to have all these things linked, and they can automate the updating as well. Publons and Scopus both have automating services. So once articles are indexed, they will ask you if they're yours, you confirm it, and they push it live to ORCID. So that can really help with updating. Again, this is a totally optional step, but it does really help build your profile. Finally, updating and maintaining your profile. It's really important once you've registered to keep it up to date. If possible, automate those processes if you can, but you need to keep your contact information, affiliation information, and your new works added in a timely manner. If you already have an ORCID profile, this is a good time to go back and make sure it does have correct, up-to-date contact information. We currently only have a very small handful of people who do have their affiliation correctly listed with that proper ROR ID so that we can find it. And we have a number of resources through the library. Jen built a really useful, very attractive LibGuide. This screenshot does not do it justice. With a lot of helpful tips, more information about what we're doing with this, and some resources including links and videos. And if you want live one-on-one help, and it's actually more like 4-on-1 help, we have NOAA IR publishing ORCID and Section 8, Section 508 virtual office hours every Tuesday afternoon, where we would be happy to help you set up your ORCID, update it, or just answer any general questions. And with that, we're going to move to questions. Jen?
Sorry, can you hear me now? Great. Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Great. So with that, there's Katie.
Hi.
I think we're happy to take questions. So if you want to enter anything into the Q&A panel, we can start to see those and answer those. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know ahead of time we did get a couple questions in, specifically sort of about how the ORCID system works and how much work it is to keep ORCID up to date. Hopefully, the presentation as a whole answered those questions. I will sort of not pre, I will just sort of address in a little bit more depth about the how much work is it to keep an ORCID up to date. Um, in theory, it's not too bad once you have sort of everything up to its current state. Just managing it after the fact isn't too bad. Ideally, as we work through this and over the next hopefully year to 2 years, we're going to start implementing a lot of those things we talked about earlier with the integrations and the ability for the library to sort of help you do some of that maintenance and the permissions for us to read and write to your profile, which then means you wouldn't really have to do that management. We could take that on for you. So hopefully that once we have that implemented and integrated, will take away a lot of that management time from you. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or if anything has popped up yet. It's quite a bit of information. I'm sure. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm glad you found it really helpful. I will say this is a new thing for us. This new partnership with the U.S. Federal Consortium. I can talk about that just a little bit. It is sort of headed by the Department of Energy. So we've been working really closely with them to get everything set up and managed in a way that'll make the most sense. And so we can get everything sort of um, to like integrated in an easy way. So in terms of like the ORCID system itself and how it works, Sarah kind of went over how it would work for the researcher. I will say on the back end and how we in the library sort of interact with it, it's all via APIs. Um, so essentially what we will do is we will go through with our API and connect directly to ORCID, harvest that information, and then using our API, say in the institutional repository, connect the metadata on our end with the metadata from the profile, make sure they match, and then add in that information. So specifically like the researcher's ORCID ID so that we can link it from their article in the repository back to their ORCID profile. Oh yeah, Lindsay, I'm glad that's helpful. Yeah, updating employers, especially when you're an affiliate, it's there's a couple ways you can handle it. I think the way Sarah you covered it a little bit. So, um, yeah, it's a really important feature. So, so I sort of went over this a little bit in terms of how much work it is to keep it up to date. That It sort of depends. If you're starting from scratch and populating from the beginning, it could take a bit of time. I think some of the methods Sarah showed, like automatically importing or using a bibtext file to update it or to get it set up, is the best way. It's really important right now for folks to make sure that those affiliations are correct. Um, because if those affiliations are correct, we will be able to go in and do some of that management for you. But until I have correct affiliations and I can say to ORCID, no, I'm from NOAA, this person's from NOAA, see these numbers match that ROR ID that Sarah was talking about. If I can prove that to ORCID, they can say, oh no, sure, Jen can update that for that person. But until we get all of that squared away. So that's why, again, like Lindsay said, it's really important to make sure you have your affiliation information updated correctly. Um, in terms of the management, again, long term, we're looking at some solutions to take a lot of that burden off of researchers when they grant us those permissions. So I will say, keep an eye out over the next 6 months or so where you may get emails from us or from ORCID saying, hey, give us permission. Can we be a trusted organization? And just know that if you see something that comes through that says NOAA is asking for you to make them a trusted organization, know that that's us. That's probably Sarah and I sending you an email saying, hey, let us help you. Let us, update your affiliations. Let us pull some information from your ORCID record. I don't see a ton of other questions coming in. Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to add? And if not, we can sort of.
There is not. I will say that we can help you a lot with setting up easy ways to update and keep things updated, because it is a bit of work to add publications. I've done this demo a few times and I always have to add a bunch of things, and I am reminded that it's kind of tedious, but it's also really important. And I would like to add that as the Bibliometrics librarian, having your ORCID really helps us find your publications for those purposes. So when it comes time to do lab and program reviews, I often use ORCIDs when we're looking at an individual or group of researchers. Those numbers are really important to have them linked. And the more we have them on more than just journal articles, reports, NOAA pubs, presentations, data sets, the better we can do in evaluating what NOAA is doing and what you as an individual are doing. NOAA does great work. We can't always track it down though. So this is one of the ways that helps us do that. So just a PSA from me, please get ORCID and use it so that we can give everybody credit for their work.
Hear, hear. Put it on everything and let us harvest things, and then we can take some burden off of you, and also, like Sarah said, account for everything that NOAA is doing. So I don't see any other questions right now. So I think what we can do is we're going to call it a day today. But again, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Sarah and I. Visit us during our office hours. We are always here to help. And with that, I think we will see you all next time.
Thank you for joining us.